The Phil Harris story, why it's of vital importance to repair vehicles correctly. Back in 2022, repair certifier Phil Harris, his wife Jo, and two other family members were travelling together in Phil's almost new Ford Ranger when they were involved in a major head-on collision with another vehicle. All four occupants of the Ford Ranger suffered moderate to serious injuries, while the driver and sole occupant of the other vehicle, an older model Honda Odyssey, was fatally injured.
We impacted, and the impact was huge. Just that impact coming through your body was just, it's really intense. And we're not long afterwards started to hear the noises of my passengers. And that was hard. That was the hardest thing to comprehend, because I knew I was alive, but the noises they were making, I didn't know whether they were dying or surviving.
Although his injuries were severe, at one point life-threatening, and he faced a long road to recovery, Phil came to the realisation that the primary reason he and his fellow passengers survived the impact was because they were in a vehicle equipped with the very latest occupant protection technologies. With Phil being a repair certifier himself and having now experienced firsthand how these complex, modern and constantly evolving active and passive occupant protection systems saved his life, he reached out to Repair Cert New Zealand to tell his story and remind repair certifiers and the wider repair industry the importance of performing correct repair processes and fully reinstating all occupant protection and safety systems on collision-damaged vehicles. A step-by-step record, data recovered from Phil's Ford Ranger's ECM. The following times record how long it took for the ABS to engage before impact and the various SRS to activate or fire after impact. Note, all recorded times after impact are measured in milliseconds. For reference, it takes 100 milliseconds to blink. At 5 seconds before impact, the vehicle is travelling at 94 km per hour, just under the posted speed limit of 100 km per hour. At this time, the driver has 9% input on the accelerator pedal at 2 seconds before impact. Engine RPM drops as accelerator input returns to 0%, and there is a slight change in steering direction at 1.6 seconds before impact. The brake pedal is depressed and speed continues to drop. While the driver has reacted and started to brake, they haven't jammed the brakes on at this point, at 0.9 seconds before impact. With brakes now jammed on, ABS is now active and speed drops quickly, 15 km per hour in 0.2 seconds, to around 77 km per hour. Right up to 0 seconds, the reduction in speed is still consistent with braking, so SRS sensors and modules don't activate or deploy any safety restraints or airbags. At 0 seconds, the moment of impact, or time zero, is when the vehicle's parameters are met to activate the safety devices. Speed is dropped to 59 km per hour. The vehicle's sensors detect a sudden and significant dramatic change in deceleration rate as the two vehicles come together, over 13 km per hour in a millisecond, and SRS devices are activated. At 10 milliseconds after impact, the seatbelt pre-tensioners activate. At 14 milliseconds after impact, the frontal airbags deploy. At 30 milliseconds after impact, the fuel cut-off system shuts off the fuel supply. At 35 milliseconds after impact, as the vehicle starts to rotate after the initial impact, the side airbags deploy.
A closer look at how collision energy was managed in the full-frame chassis and upper unibody of Phil's Ford Ranger. The left front crush zone portion, or frame end, and the front impact beam collapse completely and skew across to the right. Direct and indirect impact forces push the front chassis crossmember and right front frame end across to the right, splitting open the welded connections of the frame end and buckling the front section of the chassis side frame, forward of the front chassis crossmember. On the left-hand side, Unabsorbed collision energy progresses rearward, collapsing and splitting welds in the front section of the chassis side frame, at and rearward of the areas where the front chassis crossmember attaches. The kick-up area of the left-hand chassis side frame, directly behind the front wheel, buckles dramatically from still more unabsorbed collision energy. The chassis side frame behind the kick-up area on the right-hand side buckles slightly from the transfer of collision energy. Direct impact to the left front wheel buckles the left front steering and suspension components, driving them rearward and into the A-pillar and floor of the upper body. No further damage to the full frame chassis is evident rearward of the transmission crossmember, apart from the spare wheel carrier frame, which is buckled from the inertial weight of the spare wheel. Using the yellow horizontal line as reference, this image clearly shows the substantial amount of collapse and deformation of the front chassis frame on the left-hand side from collision energy transfer and absorption. The entire front compartment collapses and is driven backwards into the bulkhead and firewall on the left-hand side. The bulkhead and firewall absorb collision energy before moving rearward and buckling the A-pillar and upper screen pillar, displacing and buckling the left-hand doors and bending the B-pillar. At cabin floor level, the left front portion of the inner and outer sill structures, the front footwell, floor braces, stiffeners and centre tunnel buckle dramatically. Collision energy continues along the left-hand side aperture, severely buckling and splitting welded seams on the inner and outer C-pillars. The entire upper unibody has moved rearward and across on the full frame chassis, damaging mounting brackets, bolts and insulators. The steering wheel is now touching the dashboard as a result of substantial collapse of the steering column. As a result of the restrained occupants being thrown violently forward in the impact, the front and rear seat frames, tracks and lower squabs have collapsed and buckled. Collision parameters were not met to deploy the driver's side curtain airbag. The transmission and four-wheel drive transfer cases are extensively fractured and split open. The engine sump and bell housing are also badly damaged. The drive shafts, universal joints and mountings are all severely displaced. The power steering rack is also fractured in several places. Both front engine mount bolts have sheared off.
Why it's of vital importance to repair vehicles correctly. With vehicle manufacturers' safe tolerances becoming ever more refined, failure to identify and restore a damaged vehicle's safety-critical occupant protection systems in strict accordance with the vehicle manufacturer's requirements may mean the vehicle will not perform as the vehicle manufacturer intended in another collision. Essentially, this could be the difference between life and death. A word from Phil.
It was the technology that saved our lives, and luckily we were in a brand new Ford Ranger Ute, and and as a certifier I started analysing the impact of all this, and it sort of scared me about repairing cars and how critical it is to have everything work as the manufacturer designed it. The tolerances that we're working with are getting smaller and smaller, and it's the variables, or did that guy do that calibration right? Is that bracket that holds that camera back to manufacturer spec? Is that bumper clipped on properly, or is it a urethane on? It goes on and on and on. You've got to be one step ahead to be able to relay that information back to your repairer, because they're only guided by your advice at the end of the day.